human rationality and science and truth revealed by science. And this is what I try to follow. The fact that I don't have any specific religion doesn't imply that other scientists do not believe in any form of God or whatever. The conflict between faith and religion and science, I think it is stronger in rocket sciences. I'm not particularly sympathetic with, uh, um, with the idea of sins. Understanding, comprehension, and forgiveness, I think that should be much more important than the relevance given to sins in many cases. These rules, this morality is a kind of more fundamental morality that doesn't imply necessarily um, being connected to a specific religion. Those rules could be informed by religion. I don't believe in God, but I see that people that do believe in God has a kind of plus in some respect, and is having this interior peace.
I just had a great conversation with, I think, economist from Italy. I think he works one of the universities here in London. An atheist who trusts in human rationality and scientific process, doesn't believe in God, but at the same time, I think, just familiar with Christian concepts and wasn't sort of militarily atheist. So it was a good conversation. And yet, I think the key thing, where I think the key stumbling block was on the idea of sin and judgment, as well as the idea of universal morality. I mean, he seemed like he advocated the need to have universal moral standards by which we can judge one another as a society, as he thought that was a good idea, but yet he did not see it as a good idea that God would be the arbiter or the provider of those moral standards, which is quite interesting. And I think that's one of the problems that I think, generally speaking, is with such a position. If we say that the culture should decide what is right and wrong, which it does to an extent, we have to also admit and see that those standards are going to shift with cultural winds. They're going to change from one culture to another. There's not going to be the kind of consistency that I think we all desire to see when we say such things. And yet in God, that moral standard has been provided and stands to benefit us for human flourishing. Anyway, that was my point. I appreciated his point of view as well, and I tried to convey why Jesus is good news, because he can reconcile us to God, even though God is a judge. And so we cannot do away with that concept. We cannot do away with the seriousness of our sin, nor the fact that we will be judged. The good news is that that's why Jesus came, not to just be the moral model, but to be the savior of our lives. Well, I hope that those concepts were presented well, and I hope that he would have a chance to think about them. Sounds like he does have some colleagues who are religious and faithful, so I do pray that those ideas do come up, and this man continues to consider them in his heart, and realizes that we don't have to run from God, instead we should run to him. Well, thanks very much for watching. Let me know what you thought. Leave a comment, and see you in the next video. Bye. It's the same question that I ask of everyone. It's a simple question, and that is, do you have any faith or philosophy that you live by, or standards?
Difficult question. I would say science, since that I work in the university. So science and in general rationality. So
Okay.
I don't have any specific religion or faith that I follow, but human rationality and science and truth revealed by science. And this is what I try to follow. that trust the most.
Great. And in the university, is a specific field of science that you are involved with?
Well, I work in economics,
Okay.
so I'm an economist. But obviously, this has an implication in terms of what I believe in and the conduct of my life, if you want, because it means that you are expected to observe the evidence, observe the fact, try to rationalize them, and that's it, I would say.
And do you think in that regard, in that rationality, in that approach, there is a kind of opposition between faith and science?
Not necessarily. I have several colleagues who have faith and at the same time they are scientists. So not necessarily. Not necessarily. Obviously, there might be contradictions in the sense that if you have a scientific approach, you should be expected to, how to say, search evidence and search confirmation in the facts of any hypothesis, of any idea, of any conjecture you do. Faith, obviously, I think it implies a different level of trust in what you believe. But I don't think there is necessarily a contradiction, to be honest.
Yeah.
It is more at personal level, I would say. The fact that I don't have any specific religion doesn't imply that other scientists do not believe in any form of God or whatever.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. I was recently hearing that some of the, like in the Renaissance, right, in the scientific kind of advances, it was some of the Christian background people that kind of contributed quite a lot to science, and their motivation was, a starting point was that if there was a God, and if God ordered the universe, he must have done so in a ordered, meaningful, sort of structured way, and so they set out to discover what laws did he write into the universe, to the extent that things could be observable, they could be repeatable, because there was someone behind it who set it in motion, who set it, who put it together.
Well,
right?
to be honest, I have to say that in the field I work, which is economics, economics, even though it uses some mathematical tools and so on and so forth, it is not a rocket science.
Right.
The conflict between faith and religion and science, I think it is stronger in rocket sciences, like physics and so on and so forth. Then in that case, I think it becomes stronger, the potential for conflict between the two.
Right.
But not in my specific field.
Not in your specific field. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I understand.
In any case, I'm studying human behavior. So human behavior, you could inquire human behavior with scientific tools, but this does not necessarily imply that you don't trust in God.
Got it. Yeah, that's understood. Yeah. And did that position ever change for you? Like, did you ever kind of grow up and being raised, and were you exposed to religion, and is that something that you rationally then?
I was exposed to religion when I was younger, till I was adolescent, I would say, till I lived with my family. I come from Italy, so obviously there is a strong Catholic tradition in Italy. But then growing up as a kind of researcher, probably there is, I had already a kind of attitude, not developing any specific faith or religion, but looking more to the facts and to the, how to say, everyday reality, let's say.
Right. Okay, it's interesting, right? Because, for example, do you believe that those colleagues of yours or people who are of faith, would they have some rational reasons for their beliefs. Is there a possibility that the faith can be actually based on rational evidence?
This is something I don't know. Again, I think that the internal conflict between the two things is stronger if you work in rocket sciences, not if you are involved in studying human behavior, any kind of social science.
Right.
But this is something I can't tell you because I never thought about it. So I don't know if there could be any kind of rational basis for a specific faith or religion. So this is something I can't tell you because this is something I should think about.
Got it. Yeah, because I mean, from my perspective, having read, right, the Bible, right, and sort of trying to be open about authenticity of it, historicity of it, and asking the questions: how can we know whether it's representing history or whether it's myth or made up? We can apply some of the field's scientific tools, let's say textual criticism and sociology and things like that. We can apply those tools to that text and say, well, if knowing what we know about that age, right, about the first century Israel, and we know some of the other writings that came out of there, would I expect to see what I see when I read the biblical text, right? And so, from that perspective, the biblical sort of scholars have come to the conclusion that it's highly probable that what was written was actually written by the contemporaries of Jesus, because they couldn't have described the situations, they couldn't have even chosen the names of the people that they're interacting with, or the places, or the economy of things, because there's, obviously it's not an economic text, but there are, taxes, Jewish taxes, temple taxes, Roman taxes, that were all relevant and real for that day. So putting those kind of circumstantial points, we can at least get some sense of, okay, what I'm reading, it's not a made up, it's not a fantasy. It is based on
reality.
someone who lived in that period of time.
Yeah, of course.
But then it begs another question. Okay, so if that is true of what I'm reading, then what I'm reading, there's also other things that I'm reading. I'm reading about miracles. I'm reading about people coming from death to life. Jesus was an unnatural human being. It wasn't someone that people would expect to see. So that requires maybe more of a leap of faith in terms of being faced with something that's supernatural there. But as a text, I think many scholars at least have high sense of trust in authenticity of it, right? So when I say there's some rational belief, right, we can at least say that we can rationally point at Bible and say, look, it's worth reading it for its authentic description of history. Would you sort of, have you heard of that? Have you sort of read it with that lens?
I pretty much agree with you in the sense that even though I didn't read the Bible and I'm not an expert of the field, and I cannot say much about that. Interacting with other people who have faith and have a much deeper knowledge than me of sacred books. So I can buy pretty much easily that Jesus effectively existed, that what is described in the Bible is reality, was reality there. Then, as you said, it comes a leap, if you want, in terms of faith, in the sense that then you should trust that Jesus was not just, how to say, a prophet, but it was really the Son of God.
Yeah.
So this is at the higher level, I would say. But I don't have any doubt in accepting that the Bible truly represents a certain period and a certain place in the history of human life. So
Mm-hmm.
no problem about that.
And what would you, if from your limited, let's say, knowledge or limited exposure to religion, how would you describe the key messages of Christianity?
Okay. Well, I think that the only thing I could stress is the importance of empathy and the importance of having a kind of social consciousness of the others and respect um, with respect to other needs, other beliefs, other having a sort of social and consciousness and awareness. This is what I would like to.
Right, right. Would that sounds to me like a very similar, like for other religions as well. We could say, or let me ask, could we say the same thing of other religions? Could we say the same thing of um, Judaism or
This is
Islam?
something I can't say because I don't know.
Okay, okay. From what I know of other religions, I think, and I don't want to kind of paint them with the same brush necessarily, but as having spoken to many members of those religions, I think they would also say that there's an element of social, I guess, or maybe let's say human flourishing, human improvement, social cohesion, community, loving one another. Let's call it that way,
Okay.
right? In most of the religions, there's the idea of doing good, right, for the
For the others,
betterment
okay.
for the others. But one, I mean, which would kind of then beg the question: what is different about Christianity as such, and what is different about these other religions? And I think, to me, again, it comes back to the person of Jesus, right? So, you said something before, right, about how Jesus wasn't meant just a prophet, but he was the Son of God. Uh, would, what would that change, right? Well, him being the Son of God, would that, because there's many prophets that came before him, right? And
Yeah.
they all preach, Moses and David, they all were sent. Let's assume that they were sent by God. They there to do something for their people.
Yeah.
What would it be, or yeah, if you would, yeah, what it makes someone being a son of God? How does that makes things different at all?
Well, because when I said the prophet, it probably I meant a different concept. It could be just a protester. It could be just
Okay.
in that sense a prophet of anything, not necessarily religion. So it could be the leader of a kind of form of protest of social movements. Um, in that sense, it could have different implication. And the way people receive,
Hmm.
um, how to say, his message yeah, in that sense.
Okay. Okay. Kind of maybe the authority with which they
Yeah,
receive it. Maybe. Okay.
say
Okay.
say it this way.
Okay. How about your sort of understanding of sin and sin being, oh, yeah, what is your understanding of sin? Is
Okay.
that a concept that you're familiar with and
Yes, but I think in that sense I think it is more a social construct. So I think that the way sin was introduced in the perception of people, it is more a source of pain, a source of how to say um, personal hardships and difficulties, and I'm not particularly sympathetic with, uh, um, with, with with the idea of sins. To be honest, I think that one of the aspects I would like the most of Christianity is not is the importance of forgiveness and
hmm
understanding the mistakes of the other, rather than pointing your finger and saying you are a sinner and you made bad things
Mhm.
and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So I think that that is a lesson that in many cases, even in the past, have been forgotten and lost,
Mhm.
whilst they should be much more rediscovered. So
Mhm.
the importance of understanding, the importance of accepting differences, rather than spotting possible sins and so on and so forth. I'm not pretending that others agree on everything. This is not the case, but understanding, comprehension, and forgiveness, I think that should be much more important than the relevance given to sins in many cases.
Understood. Understood. And if we try to connect the concept of that forgiveness and sin, and then being the Son of God, right? So maybe you've heard this phrase, right? That Jesus came to save us from our sins, right? To save people from their sins. What would be your understanding of what that really means? So how did he come to save people, right? Because in that idea of forgiveness, right? To me, it has to do with I think maybe you would agree about, it'd be good to see your thoughts, right? So if God is, often people say God is a God of love,
Mm.
right? But also has to be said that he must be a God of justice as well, a fair justice, right? And so how do you marry love being, I want to show mercy, I want to forgive, I want to not be harsh to another, right? And Jesus was all of those things, right? He's the one who approached the destitute. He's the one who, saved the prostitute from being stoned. He's the one who dealt with the people at the edges of the society where the
Yeah.
religious people were shunning them. Jesus came to approach them, right? But at the same time, we have the idea of justice, right? To sort of say, look, if I just forgive, if I just brush things under the carpet, then I'm just playing favors,
No,
right?
of
And
course,
I'm
of
not
course.
necessarily sending out true justice. The true justice being,
But
everyone gets what they deserve.
in a sense,
Yeah.
forgiveness is a different thing with respect hiding things. So I'm not pretending to hide things. I'm not pretending to absolve automatically everyone if they have done mistakes. I'm simply saying that one should try to also comprehend and understand the reason behind the behaviors of people and in the sense I would say I'm not sympathetic with the idea of sins related to the private sphere of human life. So your sexual orientation, your for instance, I don't think that there are sins in that respect because this is a dimension of life which is exclusively private, and no one should have the authority to judge if I'm doing well or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is just an example,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
This doesn't imply, again, obviously, there are misbehaviors that should be judged and sanctioned if they take place by human law in general, and also being recognized by religious law, if you want.
Mm-hmm.
I would put more emphasis on understanding why those behaviors take place, rather than judging them as good or wrong, and that's it. So understanding is comes first,
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously there could be sanctions. I'm not saying that sanctions should not take place, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. And I completely agree that oftentimes there has been overjudgment, right? There has been judgment being made where it shouldn't have been dished out, right? Certainly human to human. And Jesus warned, judge not lest you be judged. And there's certainly a caution of judging too quickly. But at the same time, right, judgment is a very key concept in the Bible, to the extent that every one of us will be judged at the end of our lives, there will be judgment, and that's kind of woven into the entire Christian story, if you will. And it does go deeply and does go personally. So Jesus himself, right? He said, even if you think lustful thoughts towards another, like if I'm married and I'm suddenly sort of having fantasies or something like that, right, about another woman, he says that is morally the same as if I've actually committed adultery with a woman, right? Or he said, if you even think, if you carry anger inside of yourself toward another, to the point that you wish they were dead, he says that's in God's eyes morally equivalent to you having murdered that person,
Of course.
right?
Okay.
And so the bar is extremely set very high. And all of us, who can, given these internal, standards, who can ever hope that they would be found perfect? No one will be perfect in front of God, given those criteria. And yet, he still invites us into a relationship with him, right? So he's not such a harsh God that he would say, well, all of you guys have sinned and all of you guys have lustful thoughts and anger and all this. All of you guys really deserve punishment, which isn't untrue based on his own criteria, and yet he still loves us. And that's what I'm trying to I guess that's what I'm exploring, right, with this question. How can we reconcile? How did his love and his perfect justice, how did they get manifest? How did they get put together?
Well, I close with this in the sense that this is an aspect in things. I guess there's no possibility of reconciliation between faith and kind of following a sort of human rationalism, in the sense that, from my personal point of view, I will bring you this example. So, if you are married and the fact of having multiple sexual relationship with other people doesn't create any problem inside the couple, so it is freely accepted, and it doesn't create any how to say, any sadness in the other. So I don't think that there should be any religion that should judge that conduct, because this is related to private and personal life. What you should care about, if you are married, if you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, is not hurting the other. So loving the other respectfully, but respectfully means trying to avoid any kind of behavior that may create sadness in the other. That is the rule that should be followed.
Okay.
Rather than judging the effective behavior. That is, I would say, the more fundamental principle that should be followed in judging the behavior of people. If a kind of sexual behavior which is considered unrespectful from a religious point of view, but this is openly and freely and accepted by those who are involved, in that respect I don't think that there should be any judgment coming from above or from outside. This is my personal life. It is my personal life and the life of those I love. If this is absolutely fine for those who I love, and I should take care of those who I love, that is the principle to follow.
Okay.
Not judging the behavior. If it is accepted, if it doesn't represent any problem, why there should be someone else telling me, no, this is not good, this is wrong.
Okay.
Why? Because this is what I mean. This isn't just an example, but this is the first example that comes to my mind. In that respect, I think it is hard to have a reconciliation between human freedom and rationality and faith in religion. I'm absolutely fine if those who believe in any religion behave according to their rules. I'm not happy when there's a sort of trying to impose those rules to the others, if there is not a problem of a social threat, let's say.
Right. I get your point 100%, but can I just offer one sort of, let's say, counterpoint to that? And I'll use the analogy of parents and children, right?
Okay.
Let's say a child wants to have candy, right? Excessively so, right? And the parent says, no, you cannot have the candy. And the child says, well, why not? And the parent says, well, it's bad for you. But the child tries to reason through that. No, but I'm not, I'm fine with it. I'm gonna brush my teeth, and it's all gonna be fine, and all that kind of stuff. But the parent says, no, it's actually, I don't want you to have candy because, in the long run, it will be bad for you. Your diet's gonna suffer, and all that kind of stuff. Start listing the counterpoints, and the child starts listing more and more counterpoints to that. Right? At some point, the parent is gonna say, no, you cannot have that candy.
Yeah.
It's me. I'm telling you. I'm your parent. I know what's best for you.
Okay.
You are young. You can try to reason, but you haven't lived as long as I have lived. And I'm telling you, as someone more wiser, more older, that this is going to be bad for you, and you cannot have that candy, right?
Okay.
And the reason I'm listing that, is it possible that what seems all right to us, what seems like the kind of relationships that you said are not hurting anyone and everyone's participating in them willingly, to us at the moment may seem okay, as long as every party agrees to it, as long as no one's being hurt and no one's being saddened by it, we can engage in such activity. But what if actually we don't know what the long-term consequences are? And what if God sets certain standards in place because these are guardrails, because he knows, because let's say he did design us, he knows us more than we know ourselves, and he sets certain behavioral principles to sort of say, look, I'm doing this for your good, for your benefit. And that's what the Ten Commandments were all about, right? Yes, there's freedom, there's human rationality, there's human responsibilities. But look, you should not murder, you should not steal, you should not lie. No matter how justifiable or how good it seems in your eyes, these are things that will have consequences. And other things like, it's not just Ten Commandments, there's the homosexual relationships, there's other things. It's not in the Bible because he's a spoil sport. It's not that because he wants to limit human freedom, but they're there because he's doing it for the human flourishing. He said, you will do well to follow these rules. These are going to lead you to prosperity in the long run.
The point is that people should take into account the long-run implication of their behavior, and I do agree on this. But one point is the example you brought, in which because science tells you that having too much candy will have for sure negative implication for your diet, for your health. This is given. So this is science. If any other type of social behaviors will have negative implication in the long term for a couple of whatever it is, I believe that we can take this as a given. So this is more related to human freedom, and it is more related to having perhaps an open discussion in the couple, spotting this problem if they think that this problem sooner or later will emerge, and that conduct that is accepted right now may create problems in the future. This is something that should be considered by an open talk, an open discussion among the participants, the people involved. The example you brought is, how to say, something that there is no uncertainty in there. It is certain that having too much candy every day will have negative implication for your health and for your life. But
Yeah.
this is science.
Exactly, and I guess my point was not some. It was an obvious example, right, where we now know what's good or bad, right? But there were many points in the time where the science said one thing because at the time it did not know. For example, it was science that, um, the bloodletting as a form of treatment was a scientifically accepted
Yeah, okay,
treatment.
okay.
What's his name? I forgot his name, but the person who advocated for the washing of hands in the maternity wards was being ostracized by the commonly accepted science as he was put in the insane asylum because he was saying that all doctors should be washing their hands before they're engaging in giving birth because there was such a high mortality rate. He was saying that's how the germ theory came about, and so he was ended up being insane, and only later he turned out to be right. Right. What I'm saying is what we now know for true, right? Because science, by its very nature, it's a process, right? It's a process of discovery. New data, new facts come about, and then we change the hypothesis, right? We
Yeah.
go to the next one, right? We evolve. And my argument was that I have a scientific background as well. My background is physics and
Okay.
computer science. I'm speaking as a scientist to a scientist, right? What I'm saying is that science has limitations of its own, and one of the biggest limitations of science, I think, it has when it tries to go outside of its boundaries,
Okay.
right? When it tries to apply to human behavior things that are not necessarily proven facts, right?
Okay.
So, what can science tell us at this stage about human relationships? Yes, there's sociology, there's data, there's statistics, but these need to be taken very narrowly because of the complexities and the parameters that are involved. We cannot necessarily state those things with absolute certainty because there's too many factors, too many variables, too many things to consider unless we narrow the question that we're asking.
You know,
Yeah.
just to clarify, and really the last point. I mean, I'm not saying that everything should be driven by science, because, as you said, science could also be wrong at some point in time and suggest wrong things that science itself then will discover later on they are wrong. I truly believe that there should be some kind of social morality. I truly believe that there should be some rules guiding people behavior. Those rules should be very fundamental. There should be some basic principles guiding how we behave, and those principles should be the love with respect to the others, the attempt of accepting the others, the fact of behaving in such a way that we don't hurt the other, not being harsh with the others. So these should be the very fundamental rules that should guide ourselves. But these rules, this morality, is a kind of more fundamental morality that doesn't imply necessarily being connected to a specific religion. It should be more connected to the nature of human beings, how to some extent reducing and putting limits to individualism and accepting that you are living in a collectivity, and you should try to behave as best as you can in order to improve the collectivity. That's my opinion. This does not necessarily imply sharing a religion, sharing a religion or a faith. Those rules could be informed by a religion. And there could be influences in that respect, obviously. But there should be a point in which, I would just say these are, from a personal point of view, these are more fundamental principles that should be accepted in every society, regardless of any religion belief. even the more so if you have um, society composed by many different religious communities.
Hmm.
So that's why that principle should be accepted and shared regardless which is your religious belief.
Got it. But would that place, how would that consensus be arrived at then, right? How do we get to a consensus as human beings, right? And you know, who is the arbiter? which council, which body does that?
This is something that I don't
Yeah.
know about. I mean, the counselor and the judge should be well. There should be universal morality if you want. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist or it is not shared enough. And well, it is too easy to say the how to say the institution of a nation that should put in place that rules. But those rules and principle even go behind the institution of a country.
Yeah.
It should be something widely and to some extent automatically accepted by people.
Yeah.
This doesn't imply. This doesn't happen, obviously, because there are murders and whatever it is. There are um, criminal behavior, and that the um, that is the situation in which institution should step in and enforce
Hmm. Yeah.
laws that try to how to say put in place and make concrete those fundamental principles, I could say.
Yeah.
So equality, justice, social justice, justice in civil rights. Well, to some extent, this depends also on the society where you live in. And obviously there could be influences coming from the religious background of a given society. I'm not saying it is not.
Hmm.
They should become accepted by a wider community, the wider community, not only being related to a specific religious community, and as I said, being accepted regardless of your religion. So this is a this should be a common ground everyone agrees with.
Yeah, and I would just offer this thing, you know, this universal morality. I think we often, in the Western world, we don't often realize how much our laws and this idea of, you know, you mentioned social justice, you mentioned freedom, you mentioned, you know, even freedoms of speech and equality. People don't realize how much these concepts are actually Judeo-Christian concepts. Because if you do go outside of the Western world, outside of the world that we live and breathe, you know, we're like fish in the water. We don't even realize how much our laws, our institutions have been built on the Christian concepts. Because before or outside of it, you know, like for example, my wife is from Korea, from the Eastern world, right? And the ideas of Buddhism and Confucianism, yeah, there are some, you know, human, let's say, basics and principles, but certainly not the idea of a value of a human life, the idea of equality. You know, you don't see that there. You see caste systems, you see, you know, things that we wouldn't find natural, we wouldn't find normal. I guess where I'm bringing that point up is that we feel like, okay, there needs to be some universal morality or something. Like, I'm saying, well, why are we not accepting, you know, what seems to be universal morality that's given life to the system in which we're living in? It seems like we want to reject it, right? We want to say no to Christianity because it brings its all sort of other baggage with it. But we're willing to take the good things, you know, the laws, the justice and equality, other stuff. But we're gonna push back the other things, right? That we're not agreeing with it. But people don't realize that you're benefiting right now from.
No, I do agree with you in the sense
Yeah.
that I don't have any problem in admitting this. So obviously, to some extent, the Western world went much ahead in in how to say put in practice the good things coming from its own uh, Christian heritage, if you want. So I don't have any problem in accepting this. So that's fine.
And I know you probably have to go. And
Yeah.
let me just wrap up with one thing, just to bring around the loop a couple of concepts. And I just want to kind of summarize, because the idea, I think I started talking about sin, and that's kind of where
Yeah.
we diverged off. And the point that I wanted to make is that the God of Christianity, right? He says, look, I'm not expecting you to get perfect before you can approach me. The whole idea, what I was trying to claim, is that he sent his son to die on the cross for us, right?
Yeah.
Because he knew that we are always not going to be perfect. We're never going to reach that standard, right? And so he said, I will die for you, and I'll take the punishment that you deserve, so you don't have to die for
Okay.
your sins, right? And so what I'm trying to say, God wants to have a relationship with us first,
Okay.
to come as we are, right?
Okay.
He's not saying, well, you have to get rid of this addiction or this bad behavior before you can think about coming to me. No, he said to everyone that Jesus interacted with, he had an interaction with first, and then he expected them to work on themselves later, right? But because it is only because when they know him, when they know God, they know who he is, they know how loving he is, their life can begin to change,
Okay.
right? And that's, I mean, I'm speaking also somewhat personally, because that was my own story, right?
course.
I wasn't seeking faith and religion when I was perfect. I was far from it.
Okay.
But I realized that I could only work on myself to an extent. I needed some outside supernatural help to deal with the rest.
Okay.
Right, and so I think that is what ultimately, the Christian message is, the one of the gospel, the good news. The good news being that God did it for you. All is required of us, not to go to church, not to pray or do religious things, but to trust him, to
Okay.
trust him to what he has done already. That's the
Okay.
good news. That's the gospel. That's the evangelion that for 2,000 years the Christians have been spreading into the world, right? And so that's the, I don't know if you've heard it's being spoken that way. I know there's a lot of, there's, especially in Italy, obviously the home of Vatican and institutions that are church institutions, and with all of its bad history and all that kind of stuff, but at its core always has been the message of reconciliation between God and man, achieved by the sacrifice of Jesus, the Son of God, on the cross. That won't change.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, the last thing I could say is that I had friends having that sort of faith, extremely religious people, and I perfectly see the kind of interior, interior happiness and interior
Peace.
tranquility,
Yeah.
interior peace this gives to people. And the only thing I could say, this is an enormous gift. So lucky for you, lucky you that you received that gift, and I see this as a source of great internal peace and capability to some extent be better connected with people, more peacefully connected with people. So I think that I don't believe in God, but I see that people that do believe in God has a kind of plus in some respect, and is having this interior peace. So.
Very, very great place to end on. And thank you so much. Sorry that I took so much of your time, but it was such an interesting conversation. I really appreciate your opinion. Thanks so much.
Okay,
sir.
thank you.
Yeah.